Imagine being part of the largest army ever assembled in Europe. Ahead of you lies the vast Russian wilderness, a land defended by a people willing to burn their own cities before surrendering. You follow a legendary general, Napoleon Bonaparte, who has conquered nearly all of continental Europe. But this time, he faces a different kind of war. A war not only against soldiers, but against the land, the people, and the brutal force of nature. This is the story of the French invasion of Russia in 1812, a catastrophe that changed the course of history and marked the beginning of Napoleon's downfall. Background of the invasion. By 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte stood at the height of his power. His empire stretched from Spain to the borders of Russia. At the heart of his strategy was the Continental System, an economic blockade designed to cripple Britain by prohibiting European nations from trading with it. Initially, Tsar Alexander I of Russia supported the blockade, but by 1810, the Tsar began reopening Russian ports to British trade, citing economic harm and political independence. Tensions escalated quickly. For Napoleon, it wasn't just a matter of principle. It was a threat to the foundation of his empire. And so, the emperor decided to invade Russia to force the Tsar back into submission. Grande Armée, Napoleon's immense army. To launch this grand campaign, Napoleon assembled the Grande Armée, the largest military force Europe had ever seen. Over 615,000 troops marched under his command, drawn from across the empire: French, Poles, Germans, Italians, Dutch, and even Spanish conscripts. Yet fewer than half were native French soldiers. This multinational army was confident, perhaps too confident. They believed they would bring Tsar Alexander to his knees within a few months. But Napoleon underestimated the vastness of Russia, its weather, and the will of its people.
The invasion begins, crossing the Niemen River. On June 24, 1812, Napoleon crossed the Niemen River, marking the beginning of the invasion. His objective was simple: seize Smolensk and then Moscow, the spiritual and political heart of Russia. But the Russians had a different strategy. Instead of facing Napoleon head-on, generals Barclay de Tolly and later Mikhail Kutuzov used scorched earth tactics, retreating and destroying everything behind them: farms, villages, supplies. Napoleon's massive army found itself in hostile, barren territory, far from its supply lines. The fall and burning of Moscow. On September 14, 1812, Napoleon entered a strangely silent Moscow. The city was abandoned. Most civilians, officials, and even police had evacuated. But what shocked the French more was what happened next. A massive fire swept through the city, destroying large parts of it. Most historians believe the fire was deliberately set by the Russians, either by local authorities or saboteurs acting on unofficial orders. The goal? Deny Napoleon the shelter and resources of Moscow. Napoleon waited in the ruins for over a month, hoping Tsar Alexander would negotiate peace, but no message ever came. The Great Retreat begins. Realizing his position was hopeless, Napoleon began the retreat from Moscow on October 19, 1812. But by then, it was too late. Winter had arrived. Temperatures dropped to -30 degrees Celsius or -22 degrees Fahrenheit. His men were starving, exhausted, poorly dressed, and constantly harassed by Cossacks, Russian cavalry, and local partisans. As the army staggered westward, its numbers plummeted. Horses died, wagons were abandoned, and discipline collapsed. Some soldiers froze to death overnight. Others resorted to cannibalism. The retreat quickly became a nightmare. The tragedy at the Berezina River. The final disaster struck at the Berezina River in late November. Russian forces closed in on both flanks, and the river was partially frozen and impassable. In a desperate move, Napoleon ordered temporary bridges built under enemy fire. Though he managed to escape with a fraction of his troops, thousands perished in the freezing water or were crushed in the chaos. The Berezina crossing became a symbol of total collapse.
The end of the invasion. By December 1812, Napoleon returned to Paris, leaving behind what little remained of his army. Of the over 600,000 men who had crossed into Russia, fewer than 100,000 returned alive. Some estimates suggest as few as 30,000 to 40,000 troops survived in a condition fit for combat. The myth of Napoleon's invincibility was shattered. European powers, once terrified, saw an opportunity. The Sixth Coalition, comprising Russia, Britain, Prussia, Austria, Sweden, and others, was formed and began pushing Napoleon back. This disastrous campaign directly led to Napoleon's defeats at Leipzig, 1813, and eventually his abdication and exile to Elba in 1814. Historical impact.
The French invasion of Russia is one of the most catastrophic military failures in history. It teaches timeless lessons about overconfidence, logistical oversight, and the power of resistance. For Russia, the campaign became known as the Patriotic War of 1812, a rallying cry for national unity and heroism. General Mikhail Kutuzov became a national icon. Russian resistance was celebrated in art, music, and literature, including Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. For Napoleon, the Russian debacle began the unraveling of his empire. It was a turning point not just in the Napoleonic Wars, but in the entire political map of Europe. Closing. The 1812 invasion of Russia is a powerful reminder. No matter how strong an army, how brilliant a general, or how confident a nation, nature, time, and resistance can undo even the greatest empires. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated with more epic battles and forgotten history right here on Traces of History. See you in the next video.